So we've had these two groups, as I mentioned to you, working through the book, and it's just been a tremendous experience. And what we've been doing the beginning of each of our sessions is sharing. I just wanted you to know this. I thought you might appreciate this. I'll ask them to share their Hesed monies, their Hesed.
Yeah.
And every week we've been doing that. And I will say that just listening to people, Hesed has entered not only the vernacular of our speech, but in so many ways kind of just our bloodstream a little bit here. And your book has played a huge part in that. And I just want to thank you for it. It's been tremendous.
Good. Well, thank you.
Yeah. I know you get asked this probably a lot about the book. What possesses a person to write an entire book about one word?
Well, I was working in the Psalms, and in particular the Psalms of Lament. And what I noticed was in the Psalms, laments do a transition. It'll lament, and then it'll transition into worship or praise. And in several of the Psalms of Lament, when it transitions, there's this word Hesed. And because of your Hesed, we're not destroyed or something like that in the Psalms. And I had studied Hebrew, and when I was in college, and I don't remember our Hebrew teacher ever making any sort of issue about this word Hesed. And when I started running it, in all the different biblical passages, I saw how significant it was, and started trying to define it. It's not definable. It's translated, and if you read the book, you know this is translated 169 different ways. I think it has the largest range of meaning of any Hebrew word, maybe of any word in any language. And so I came up with the translation. It's when the person from whom I have a right to expect nothing gives me everything. And I think that's pretty good. I mean, Jesus defines it in Luke 6. When he says that God is grateful he's gracious to the ungrateful and the wicked. And because God is gracious that way, that we should be merciful just as he is merciful. And it really is I think it is the key to understanding God's grace.
Yeah, let me say, if you're watching this video online, we have Michael Card on two big screens up to the left and right, and I can't keep staring between the two screens while he's talking. I'm just going to stare up at you, so I'll be looking off screen. So you mentioned Hesed. Let me just speak with you for a moment, then we'll open it up to questions. You mentioned Hesed before this book, before Inexpressible, in a number of other works. How long has this been on your radar? It's just a big deal.
Well, it kept coming up, and once again, I had in my study of Hebrew, I had never had any of my professors. I had two Hebrew teachers. I had never they never pointed this out as being this hugely significant word, and I kept seeing it and kept seeing it, and then I started kind of doing the background work. It really is. I think it's the key. I mean, that sounds like an awful big thing to say, but I stand in front of the cross of Jesus, and I think I have no right to expect anything from you. I nailed you there, but what do I get from you? A second chance? No, I get more chances than you can imagine. When the person from whom I have a right to expect nothing gives me everything. That's the cross. I mean, that's the work of Jesus. And again, when Jesus says that God is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked, I think that's his definition of Hesed.
Is there anything like in rabbinic literature, is there anything like a definition of Hesed from the rabbis?
Yeah, I think the rabbis talk about Hesed a lot. I've got my notes here. They talk about Hesed a lot. but they talk about how fragile Hesed is in men. I'm looking at my notes here. Uh, um, and of course, you have Hasidic Judaism. That's the Hebrew word for saint is a Hasid. It's a person who does Hesed. So it really is fundamental to Judaism, this idea of Hesed.
What is the distinction between Hesed and grace? Hesed and grace.
I don't think because of the way language works, I think Hesed is one of those words. It can be translated as grace. That's one of the 169 different translations. Um, they're definitely linked. I mean, Hesed mean it can be translated grace, um, kindness, covenant mercy. I mean, I think you saw in the book. I opened the book with a page of all of those.
Yeah.
You know, fundamental love, deep love, unfailing love, reliable solidarity, covenant loyalty, kindness, honoring, pity, active goodness, favor, miracle mercy, compassion, loyal friendship. It's like I said, it's translated 169 different ways, and it happens. I'm looking at my notes again. It happens 250 times in the Hebrew Bible. And it's the word that God uses to describe himself to Moses, which is to me is amazing. When God's defining himself twice, he uses that word to Moses. He says, I'm full of Hesed and I show Hesed to thousands. So it's fundamentally who God is. So it's a huge word. And I just never understood why, when I was in university studying, people didn't make a bigger deal out of this word. I just think it's fundamental.
I think we all are having that same sensation reading your book. I mean, it's so pervasive, right, and
Yeah.
fundamental. Could you one more question, then we'll open it up. Some of us were a little surprised that list of translations of Hesed at the beginning of the book.
Uh-huh.
Some of the negative words, disgrace, reproach, shame.
Yeah.
Could you speak to that? That's surprising.
Yeah, well, that's just part of the way that words work. They have these antonyms. They have these negative. Hold on a second. My granddaughter just came in. Um, they have, they have these antonyms. That's just part of the way language works. And I don't think I can explain that away. I mean, at one point it's translated disgrace. When somebody looks on the nakedness of his sister, it's Hesed, and you think, what in the world? And I can't explain that away. I just know that sometimes words do that. Sometimes words have opposite meanings.
Yeah, I was just curious. I know in theology they talk about like apophatic theology, right?
Yeah,
Approach God using the negation. Is it something like that, perhaps, or it's just the shadow side of Hesed, perhaps?
yeah. Well, and again, I don't. I'm trying to think of an analog. I mean, it's just that words derive their meaning from the context. Words don't really have meaning in and of themselves. They derive their meaning from context. And what's the classic in Job? Job's wife. She's castigating him for something, and she uses the word Hesed, and it's translated curse. I can't remember the passage, but anyway, I can't explain the way. Sometimes words have this negative opposite meaning, and Hesed happens. It happens that way maybe half a dozen times in the Hebrew Bible.
Excellent. Okay, we have a lot of folks here who'd like to talk and are praying that I'll stop talking. But let's do that, guys. Just don't be bashful. Anything you'd like to say or ask?
Yeah, no really hard questions. Don't ask me anything hard.
Let's talk. Here's your opportunity. Miss Imogen, you had something you wanted to say.
You may have to repeat the question for me to hear it too.
I'll do so. Sure. I'll do so. Who has a question? Yes, ma'am.
This is really more of a comment. I really appreciated your description of God as being stubborn. I never thought of him as being stubborn, but that brings to mind the songs, "Your love is running after me." And, "Oh no, you'll never let go. Through the highs and through the lows. You'll never let go of me."
Did you get that?
I think I got most of that in terms of the word Hesed describing God as persistently pursuing us.
And stubborn. Yeah, particularly stubborn.
Yeah. Well, and there's kind of an example of where it's translated in a kind of a negative way, stubborn, but it really is kind of a positive thing. And again, my definition derives from this experience of standing in front of the cross of Jesus. And I look at Jesus and I say, I have no right to expect anything from you. But what do I get? I get everything from you. And God has in his love for us and in his sort of defining grace, he just won't let us go. I mean, and I don't think it's hard to have language for it, except we have this word Hesed, that God loves us as we are and not as we should be, because no one is as they should be.
Yeah, good. Who else? Yes, ma'am.
How long did it take you to write your book?
How long did it take you to write your book?
I think it was probably about 3 years, because there was a lot of research went into it, and a lot of basically spending time in those texts, because I forget how many times it occurs. It occurs 400 times in the Hebrew Bible, and then you have to look for it in the New Testament, even though obviously the New Testament's in Greek, and so the word Hesed isn't going to appear. But then you look at times where it appears, as loving kindness, or some other Greek word. I think with Jesus again in that passage in Luke, I think Jesus is defining Hesed. I think Paul, who interesting to me, he's not that interested in Hesed. He'll quote. There's a half a dozen passages that have the Hebrew word Hesed in it, and Paul will quote those passages, but he stops right before the word Hesed appears. And I still don't understand that. But it took a long time to write that book. I'm working on a book now, which I think is going to be my last book, and I've been working on it 3 years. I think 3 years is kind of the maximum that my attention span will. Young people don't have great attention span, so mine's about 3 years.
What's the new book?
The new book is all the details of Jesus' life and what they mean. So how many languages does he speak? What does it mean that he's from Galilee? Every detail of his life. And I see new things every day. I saw something new today. I teach a Wednesday night Bible study at my church. I saw something in Acts about Jesus that was absolutely new. And all these years I've looked at his life, and you would think you'd be familiar with all the details, but I'm still collecting these things. And that, because I just think American Christianity is Pauline. We preach and we refer to Paul a lot more than we refer to the Gospels. And I'm a Jesus freak. I'm from the Jesus movement. I'm one of those people. And I just think we need to understand the life of Jesus better. Why does he say what he says? Why does he do what he does? In what way is he? Still obviously a fully Jewish person. And in terms of the fact that he's still within Judaism, how do we understand that he's doing this? Sometimes I wonder if Jesus was ever intent on starting a new religion that was outside of Judaism. I just think he is the fulfillment of everything that Judaism ever talked about, the Lamb of God and all of those, Day of Atonement, all those kinds of things. He's the fulfillment of all those things.
Tremendous. Who else?
I've got a question.
Question over here.
So you said that 169 translations. Out of those, throughout all your research, were there some that maybe represented Hesed in a greater way than others? Were there any that were kind of difficult for you to maybe not understand, but that maybe had a little bit more research involved in it? Because I know with 169 terms, some of them may make sense more than others.
Yeah.
So were there any that kind of stood out to you?
Well, I mean, the reason that there's so many is Eugene Peterson. He's the person that we can blame, because in the Message, he came up with so many different ways to translate it. And again, those translations come from the context of the passage. You know, the words have their meaning. The meaning of a word comes from its context. And the first time I ever heard that, I thought that was the most liberal, stupid idea I'd ever heard. And then somebody asked me, he said, well, what does the word key mean? K-E-Y, what does that word mean? And the guy said, you can't tell me until I tell you the context. Is it the key idea? Is it the key that you open the door with? I mean, what is it? And so I was convinced, oh, okay, so words do get their meaning from the context. And so that's what you have to do with Hesed. You have to look at each one of these times that occurs, and within the context of what of its occurrence, you have to say, well, what's the best way to translate that? And again, I think that the simplest thing we can say is Hesed has this huge range of meaning because it occurs in all these contexts that lend themselves to that. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. But when God in Exodus 34, when God will say to Moses, you know, I show Hesed to thousands, you know, in one sense, Hesed is almost one of his names. That's pretty amazing to try to put that into words. And so 169 different ways of translating it. And probably at least 100 of those are Eugene Peterson's The Message. It's Eugene's fault that the number is so high. I think King James translates it 14 different ways. If you have my book, it's in the book. I think King James translates 14 or 16 different ways, but Eugene, you know, jacks that way up to like 100.
I have one. Hey, Michael, I'm Casey. I'm over here running everything, but I'm here at our church, and I love the chapter on sympathetic resonance. And a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking about that with our church and how we had a moment just to really focus in, put out all the distractions of the morning, and focus in on God, and how we're not looking for an emotional response, but when we get to God, there is an emotional aspect as He is creator of our emotions. And so when we're in tune with God, we often say we can feel God's presence. And you speak to that. I really, really love that.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, when especially in American Christianity, this is in worship, because worship is kind of, I mean, I think the progression is, you know, early in Christianity, the center, the altar was the center, and the Eucharist was the center, and then Martin Luther happens, and then the pulpit becomes the center, and the sermon is the center of everything in terms of our worship. And in our time, I think the drum set is the center, and everything.
I would agree to that. I would agree. I would agree to that.
Yeah, everything sort of centers around worship, and I think what Hesed does is that it helps to bring that back. I think what you are kind of hinting at is the fact that there's this Hesed insinuates or implies. I can't think of a good word, but Hesed sort of puts things back in their proper order, and it's this focus on God and who He is. And once again, I'll say this until my face turns blue. When the person from whom I have a right to expect nothing gives me everything. Now, certainly out of that springs our worship. I worship God because I have no right to expect anything, but He's given me everything. And when I think about that, I celebrate His worth, which is what worthship is. Worthship is celebrating the worth of God. So, yeah, I agree with you. It becomes this key to sort of understanding what worship is. And the other thing that I think about worship is that we don't appreciate is, and I can't quote the passage in the Hebrew Bible that says that, oh, these are the kind of worshipers that God is seeking. I forget what verse that comes from, but the idea is that we worship God because He's seeking us. We're responding to His seeking of us. That's horrible English, but worship is always a response. It's always a response, and it's a response to God's Hesed. So,
Who else?
Did your, Michael, great book, I really enjoyed this. Did your definition of Hesed change any as you worked through writing this book, or is it the definition that you began with?
Did your definition of Hesed change any as you wrote the book?
yeah, I don't think it has because, I mean, in one sense, after the Hesed book, I went on, I'm working on other things, and so at some point, your understanding stops developing and progressing. So I still stand by that definition. When the person from whom I have a right to expect nothing gives me everything, that's the best I can do of trying to define this undefinable word. I really do think you can't define it, but for me, that's the best I can do. I stand. And you look up at that cross and you say, I have no right to expect anything from you. I nailed you there. There's that wonderful Rembrandt painting, if you know that painting, where Rembrandt is one of the people who's raising the cross of Jesus, and Rembrandt realized that he was really responsible for crucifying Jesus. My sin is responsible for nailing him to the cross. And I look at him, it's hard not to weep. I look at him and I think, I have no right to expect anything from you, but you give me everything. You give me all of yourself. You give me life. You give me all these blessings, a wife and children and grandchildren and, a community and a purpose for my life. And that's Hesed. That's Hesed.
Nice. I wanted to make sure you heard his first comments as well. He said how much he really appreciated the book. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, I heard that. Thank you.
Who else? Even in the back, you guys just kind of shout it out and we'll ask it.
Yeah, no trick questions like where do babies come from or something like that.
Over here, Mary Holly has a question for you, Michael.
Okay, Mary.
I have a question for you. Would you agree that Jesus is a personification of God's Hesed?
Would you agree that Jesus is the personification of God's Hesed?
Yeah, I would, and then I would say it this way: Jesus is the incarnation of God's Hesed. He incarnate. I mean, if Hesed is sort of the fundamental truth idea of who God is, Jesus incarnates that. And He's the Word. In fact, this is really risky for me to say this, but sometimes. And I won't be dogmatic about this. Never be dogmatic about what the Bible's not dogmatic about. But when it says the Word became flesh, sometimes I wonder if that word is Hesed. If Hesed is this fundamental word that describes who God is, and Jesus incarnates it, He's the Word, Logos, right? Sometimes I wonder if the Logos, which is a Greek word, if the Logos of God was really Hesed. I would never be dogmatic about that, but I do know that He incarnates everything that God is, and Hesed is certainly. I wouldn't say Hesed describes everything that God is, but Hesed describes fundamentally who God is, Again, Hasidic Judaism in the Jewish community. I was in Jerusalem not long ago, and there's Hasids. They're a Hasidic community. They wear those funny fox fur hats, and they have the long, ear things hanging down the corners of their beard, and they dress in black silk, and they're these bizarre looking guys. Anyway, I was talking to one of them, and I said, you're this is Hasidic Judaism, right? He goes, yeah, right. I said, so how does Hesed fit in? He goes, we totally trust in God's Hesed. That's what makes us Hasids. That's what makes us saints in Judaism. And again, I'm not totally taking our example from this one group of Judaism, but there is this group within Judaism that realize that Hesed is fundamentally who God is and who they are. I mean, they are Hasids. They are people. And I said, so are you guys that do Hesed? And he goes, no. We're people who depend on God's Hesed. That's why we call ourselves Hasids. Not that we do Hesed. Of course, the Hebrew Bible says that we should do Hesed. But we're Hasids because we rely on God's Hesed. And boy, I'm thinking, you are so close to the cross. I mean, that's the cross of Jesus is the ultimate demonstration of God's Hesed.
Who else?
I just got one question, one comment. Have you written a study guide to the book?
No, I haven't, but I think, I'm not sure, but I think the publisher did. InterVarsity, they tend to do that, but I'm not sure.
Well, again, just how much the appreciation of this book. I think you've opened up a whole concept here to people that would have probably an area that we would have never discovered in and of ourselves within our own lives.
Yeah.
You said a while ago about the words in and of themselves have no meaning. Their meaning is built around the concept. That's exactly what you have done here.
Yeah. Well, I so appreciate that. That I'm an affirmation junkie. Thanks for that affirmation. And that will that helps me to get this last piece of work done that I'm trying to get done that I'm having trouble finding the motivation to do. So thank you so much for that.
Miss Imogen, what did you say before we started?
I would like to thank you. It is a very difficult job to write and please the masses where they can understand, and you have done that. You have given of yourself and God's wishes that other people might enjoy your book. It is a book that we will always read, we will always remember, we will always pick it up and say that this question, this answer, this line speaks to all of us. And thank you.
I can't repeat that. I hope you got that.
Yeah, no, you're gonna have. I was gonna say you got to repeat that because I couldn't catch that.
She just
come on, sum it up for me.
She said, "Thank you so much. It's rare to be able to write something for the masses. We will continue to turn to this book. God bless you. We hope other people write it. It was so beautiful. It sounds like something my pastor might would have said in a sermon. stuff like that. I can't quite remember."
Yeah. In the book, you were straining to speak with the eloquence that my pastor speaks with.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I get that. I totally get that.
Yes, the lady who said that is Miss Imogen Wetherington, and she is an English teacher par excellence, and she really is touched by your book, and she was sharing all of that, and it was kind of a beautiful expression of appreciation for your work.
Well, thank you. Well, I mean, fundamental to the book is this idea of words and how words work, and it really, when you think that God, I mean, when Jesus, the incarnation happens, I won't say he reduces himself to a word, but part of the incarnation is that when he takes on human flesh, he becomes the Word. And I mean, words have this. I mean, I can say a word depending on the context, we'll see there's I've got a really good example I can't think of. I can't think of it. There's something you could shout in a movie theater, and people will all run out screaming like, "Oh, bomb! There's a bomb!" Or "That's a bomb!" And people will run out screaming. But you say that in a music concert, and people think, "Oh yeah, that's a bombing. That's really good." The context. I can't communicate it, but yeah, I should just stop there. I just stop there.
It's good. Others, questions, comments, anything you would like to say?
Yeah, anybody else who wants to talk about how good the book is, I'd love to hear that.
Well, I just want to thank you. Honestly, I think we've done a lot of book studies, and this has been so well received. And you taking the time to do this. I know you get this all the time, but I don't actually. So thank you. Thanks, Wyman. I've been listening to you since high school and reading your works. It's a real pleasure to be able to speak to you. So to kind of sit here and have you be able to talk to our church is a real blessing. And I just want to say that on behalf of all of us, I think you should not retire.
Yes.
Just keep writing, if you will.
Well, here's what I've learned, Wyman. Life is seasonal. There are seasons. And for 42 years or whatever, I've done this. I'm not going to quit writing, but I'm not touring anymore. I've got 2 more concerts that are about 13 hours away that I've got to drive to. They're both in Minnesota for some reason. But once those 2 are done, I'm done. I'm not driving anymore. It's all those years of, being in a bus or being on a plane or all those things. But I'm not going to stop my Wednesday night Bible study, and I'm not going to stop studying. And I think this Jesus book will be the last one, but I don't know. I can tell you, I'm just so excited about this book. I don't know why no one has written a book like this. There's in the 19th century. I just read this. In the 19th century, 60,000 books were written on the life of Jesus. 60,000. And that just blows my mind. And obviously I haven't looked at all of those, but I've looked at, I think I've read 47 books on the life of Jesus in the last couple of years. And none of them are doing this. None of them are simply saying, what is every detail of his life and what does it mean? I was in Jerusalem, again, talking to a rabbi, the same rabbi, and I was bragging to him about how kosher Jesus was, and that Jesus would, for the pilgrimage feast, the 3 pilgrimage feasts, Jesus would walk 100 miles to go to Jerusalem when he doesn't have to, because the limit was 25 miles. If you lived within 25 miles of Jerusalem, you had to walk to the feast. Jesus lives 100 miles, so by law, he didn't have to go, but he did anyway. And I'm trying to impress this Jewish rabbi with how observant and kosher Jesus was. And this rabbi says to me, but yeah, do you know what that means? I said, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, do you know what that means? I said, well, why don't you tell me? And he said, what that means is Jesus spends 3 months out of every year walking back and forth to Jerusalem. Jesus spends 3 months out of every year walking back and forth to Jerusalem for these 3 feasts, the pilgrimage feasts. And what I realized was, here's a detail of Jesus' life that I knew, but I didn't know what that detail meant. Okay? What does it mean that he speaks 3 languages? What does it mean that he's from Galilee? Those sort of things. So I'm so excited, and I would appreciate your prayers, because I have trouble having blocks of time to get stuff done. But I'm so excited about this idea. I want to know everything that can be known about his life, everything that can be known. So there it is.
Well, thank you so much for this. It's just been a real treat. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been fun to talk to you guys.
When's the next book going to be out?
I don't know. It's going to be at least 2 or 3 years. I've got so much work to do.
We're getting over to.
I got grandchildren. My granddaughter just came. I got work. I got grandkids to take care of.
We need you to hustle up a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much. God bless you.
Thanks, y'all. God bless you too. See ya.